obviously created from sex toys, and that's where the snakes, the whips came. I started to use them first as snakes around the lingam. And then once I actually got a hold of one, I realized what a great material it was and how I could use it not just sculpturally but as line drawings as well. And it just had this really fantastic versatility formally, but then also in terms of a symbolic object. There are so many associations. America, unfortunately, the first contemporary association is that of Indiana Jones.
Oh,
and
yes.
then it just goes, below to slavery. But then for me, I was coming at it in terms of self-flagellation, which is part of spiritual ecstasy in Hinduism and Christianity and Islam, and, oppression, and it became this powerful vessel to hold power and power dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
And so I began to use it in its kind of various forms. So you'll see here 6-foot whips, and you'll see there 8-foot whips, and you'll see riding crops and cat o' nine tails, and just started to use all the various ones that I could in various configurations to start exploring different themes. And like that piece, the Fountain of Youth piece that uses 40 whips there, that one I made earlier. There are 40 whips for my age when I made it, and there are 12 nooses within the piece for each year closer to death.
Uh-huh.
And it's really kind of just dealing with the tyranny of, everyone needing you to be young and beautiful, and how deep that goes for women, and how hard it is to come to terms with your body as it ages and it shifts and it changes, and it's dedicated. It's after Zenith, after my son, and kind of my own relationship to my body and how it's changed.
I love the two fountains in relation to one another, because I see how you go back to this ideal, mythical fountain of youth and ideals of beauty in a neoclassical way too, but then you sort of reverse it from within, and one is more like a punked out version of a Baroque sculptural language, and the other one, I know you told me that that's meant to be yourself during pregnancy, and you triplicated your figure sort of to play with and against the myth of the three graces. So the neoclassical idea of beauty captured by Canova, and also there's a play with the Narcissus myth and the Caravaggio painting in one of the three figures where you're looking at yourself in the water. And I think it's wonderful, this sort of grotesque version of the idea of femininity and beauty. And the chromatic choices seems very carefully chosen as well, right?
Yeah.
And this is really throughout your work. And maybe you can tell us a little bit about that too.
Yeah, sure. This piece, it's basically, it says Allahu Akbar, and it's the Kufic script from the Iraq flag of 2008. And the color scheme is that of the Iraq flag. So the white of the wall is the white in the flag, and then there's green, red, and black. The black is really just in the little accents that are underneath, and the green and the red have been given dominance there. That piece, the Heartland piece, really talks about America under Obama, so it's red, white, and blue as in the colors of the flag there. In these paintings, the green often refers to Islam. The pink often refers to a very excessive, deranged version of femininity. And so the choices, the red in this refers to blood. So the choices of numbers, colors, forms, it's all very symbolic and conceptual.
And in the case of the wall drawings or sculptural wall drawings, you use the whiteness of the wall as an integral color too.
I do, with these two pieces, the white of the wall is really important. With this one, it's much less important. But yeah, with this, the red is more important.
And then you use, you make text-based work, like in this case, and then the sculpture with the Indian word for mom.
Yeah.
Or otherwise more simple, easily recognizable images like this one, which is a woman's uterus, but also a cow. So a very strong, resonant image in Indian culture. I see that text is important also in the use of titles that you come up with, which often changes, I think, in the process.
Yeah.
And sometimes they contain, you know, punchy lines that create irony and humor, sometimes even a kind of dark humor. So they are a way of leading in, or teasing in the viewer, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. There are, you know, specific reasons for specific dedications, like the Sarah Palin painting, Gunning for Gold, it's called. And that one is dedicated to the artist Reena Banerjee. And she's definitely one of my favorite artists. And other than the fact that she was actually babysitting my child while I was painting that painting for me, it was also a kind of honoring her own strength and determination. She had a show earlier the year around the corner at the Haunch of Venison, battling a serious disease while she was, and she still is, some real serious health issues while she was doing it, and really inspired me endlessly with her courage and her determination. So that one is dedicated to her. The white painting there of Iceland's Prime Minister Jóhanna Sigurðardóttir, who is the first openly lesbian Prime Minister to have been elected, is dedicated to my friend Chitra Ganesh, who is a fantastic artist, another inspiration, and also a lesbian. And so the title is both also that it's Chitra's time now, as it is Johanna's, and in a tribute to like their ascension by embracing their feminist selves and rejection of patriarchy.
So there is a sort of family of kindred spirit, but it also relates to your involvement as an activist for women's artists.
Which is related to the two sets of gloves are both dedicated as well. The one on the left, it's called The Return of Devastasia, after Maria Benjamin. And Maria Benjamin is an artist friend whose wrestling name was Devastasia. And she's half Pakistani and half Canadian, and so that one is dedicated to her. And then the other pair is dedicated to Sunita Vishwanath and Women for Afghan Women. Sunita Vishwanath is the founder of an organization, and this organization, Women for Afghan Women, has been doing the most amazing work for about 10 years. They have centers all over Afghanistan, one in Queens as well, and they have basically rescued and educated just amazing amounts of women from really terrible, terrible situations. There was an article in Time magazine recently about their work with Bibi Aisha on the cover, whose nose was cut off by her husband and her ears were cut off by him. And they had been, this is the organization that had given her refuge and brought her to America to have her reconstructive surgery. And it was really kind of this, they were put in a really horrible position because the Time magazine article used their work to justify the war. And so they came under a lot of attack and then had to put out, you know, statement after statement after statement about how they were opposed to the war, but because of their work, they were really reliant on the support of whatever outside allied forces there were to keep the Taliban at bay so that everything that they had done to date would not be undone. So the title is Duo Duo, and it refers very much to this really complicated position that they find themselves in, you know, and it's dedicated to their work. So in that way, it comes through. With this piece, it's called No Way Home, and is dedicated to Subodh Gupta and Georgia O'Keeffe. And Georgia O'Keeffe had very, iconic images of the Texas Longhorn skull against the American flag, which she had actually intended very ironically, and then were embraced actually very unironically as a symbol of America. And Subodh Gupta had one of his seminal first pieces was called The Way Home, and he uses metaphors of cows and cow dung and over and over and over in his work as well. But I was approaching it obviously from an absolutely feminist perspective. And first, the piece was called Roe versus Wade after the American abortion law, but the piece changed when it became this made out of whips as opposed to a drawing. And also started to refer back not just to birth and all of that, but there being no way home for me, no return to India, no real home in America, and the idea of a man having a way home and a woman not having one.
And what was your experience? When did you come to New York? You were born in Mumbai, right?
Yeah, I moved there in 1984 when I was 14 and a half.
And then came to London to
study in 2002 and finished up in 2005. So had a break in between, stayed here for 2 years, over a 3-year period. And that completely changed my practice as well.
How so? How was it, the experience of coming to London and in that environment, in that time?
I think it was as intense as grad school can be, like for any artist. But I thought, okay, I had been spending a lot of time in India, and a lot of Indian artists come to Goldsmiths, and there's a real connection between Goldsmiths and India, and I thought I would rather study here as opposed to America. And it was, really interesting, and they kept saying to me in the first year over and over, you're demanding too much of photography, you're demanding too much of photography. And I didn't quite understand what they meant then, but I had to go away and think about it, and then I just started making all these other things, and I realized that I just couldn't work with photography anymore to contain my ideas. They had to be sculptural, three-dimensional, video, whatever it may be, but the ideas were getting much too complicated to compress into one frame or in one idea or gesture.
And there's a whole series called Reconciliation that you've been doing in photography that just came to my mind, because it seems like that there you're trying to play against the restraint of the medium, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not sure we've mentioned this, but the imagery you're using for the paintings as well, they come from digital images over
internet,
the internet.
all the internet.
And in photography too, in this series where you basically take two cities that are usually historically, politically, culturally at the opposite of the spectrum, and you sort of conflate them into one hybrid.
Yeah.
And so you manipulate them digitally.
But I don't shoot them. I don't make those images anymore.
Right. So it's about appropriating existing images and then fusing opposites or binary contradictions into one. Is that an ongoing series?
Yeah. It is an ongoing series, and it's also an ongoing kind of conceptual gesture that happens through my practice, both in photography, in painting, in sculpture. This kind of bringing together of opposites to have them exist together is really, really important gesture for me. I think the coexistence of them.
That made me think about that painting. That is a collage. I think it's the only collage of the paintings that you're showing. But it seems to me that collage can be sort of a metaphor for your conceptual approach throughout your different mediums. So even the chromatic choices are often about two colors played against each other, like the red and the green here, and in the photographs too, with the two elements. And it seems more about like the Brechtian notion of art, so that you don't resolve contradictions, but you isolate them boldly.
Absolutely.
And then you let them sort of being in contrast with one another, and that sort of creates a good shock in the viewer, right?
Yes.
Another aspect that I wanted to ask you about is your video production, because throughout your work you seem to conflate different time levels and spaces and cultures as well. And with time-based art, you do that. I remember especially one video, Happily Never After, which lasted a couple of minutes, but sort of opened up very different dimension from the futuristic to the archaic. Can you describe a little bit that work?
Yeah, that video, I think some of you might have seen it here last year. And it's a robot that offers you several choices. The first choice being, if your God is your first lover, you will marry no mortal. And it goes through various choices. The first one being that you will become a prostitute and consider all your lovers as gods in mortal forms. And then it goes to if you're forced to marry a mortal, you will refuse your husband except when you believe him to be your god. Or if your God is your first lover and you're forced to marry a mortal, you will bear your husband no children and consider him a son from a previous life. Or if your God is your first lover and you're forced to marry a mortal and bear him children, you will see the children as husbands from past lives. So this idea of, this patriarchal engagement and relationship being a real constraint as opposed to, the kind of celebrated choice that many of us make without considering it through.
And all you did was basically just filming this fortune-telling robot on a beach in Mumbai, right?
Yeah.
And you were telling me that it's a common object to find.
Yeah. I mean, you just go and you plug in the headphones and it'll tell you your future, apparently, but it's often really bad.
How is your thought process while you're working? Like that kind of video sort of came out of a chance encounter, or but doing the paintings, do you sit down and draw firsthand after having chosen the image, or with your sculpture too, or it's more like an intuitive kind of process as you go?
I think basically it's both, I mean, I start out knowing who I'm going to paint and having some ideas about the elements that'll be in the painting, but then the rest of it is just really determined by the process. And even with like with the drawings, they're maybe less process oriented than the paintings and the sculptures, because really it's so much the process of making them that certain decisions can only be made. Like, I may know, okay, this is what happens here, but then I don't know what comes after that until I come to that point and I look at it and then I do that, and then only after that does the second step then come to me. So it's really like a slow unfolding, that you
process.
Yeah, you really just have to let it happen, and kind of get out of the way.
And I was curious to ask you, is there any play with the mandala structuring or that sense of composition in Heart of Darkness? Because I saw some of your earlier work
Absolutely,
dealing with that formal element.
Yeah, I worked with the mandala form two-dimensionally for a while, and then the lingams are the three-dimensional mandalas, because when you look at them vertically, it's a mandala.
On the base.
And so that whole concept of the circle within the square and all of that is really, really crucial to all of these, because they kind of do become against the wall, these mandala-like kind of objects, where the wall itself functions as the space to hold the circle.
And do you find your work in one medium, sort of giving you new ideas one in another? Is it? And do you often work from one to the other? Or
Yeah, and it's often sometimes where, you know, something that I think needs to be one painting ends up being two paintings, because the idea just needs to kind of be sorted through and go one way with one intention and the other way with the other intention. Because so much, as you said, is about these opposites existing together, and sometimes they can and sometimes they need to just exist with something else instead.
Something I wanted to ask you, because just nearby here there's a beautiful show on the late fabric works by Louise Bourgeois. And in my mind, when I look at your sculpture, the one that deals more directly with the body, it's in your own personal language. But to me, there's this notion of Louise sculpture as the body, and this clashing often of art and life coming together with their tensions. Is she an artist you've looked at, or that inspires you?
Very, very, very inspirational to me. From everything from what she makes to the fact that she kept making till she died.
Yeah, until the end.
Yeah. You know, that one can only aim for that life. You know.
And is there an element at all of catharsis, or the way she?
Yeah, definitely. Like that mouthpiece, it's Prisoner of My Womb. I made it when I was pregnant, and there was, I mean, I banged myself endlessly, banging those freaking nails into the piece. I had so many sore thumbs and fingers and cuts and bruises, and there was a very annoying guy here at the opening who, I'm sorry, but he really was. Took it in super patriarchal, super as stereotypical way as can be, the romance of mother, but mother is soft and that's why she can bear those nails, you know. And I was like, that's like the total fucking opposite intention of the piece. It's like, how about the fact that the mother is actually being fucking nailed, you know, and that every bit of it hurts like hell, you know. And